This is an Apple Watch Ultra 1. This is my Apple Watch Ultra 1. And outside of fitness, I've pretty much stopped wearing this. Even though I've made multiple videos about it, I've sung its praises, and I've been an Apple user since the beginning, I just stopped wearing it. And today, I want to talk about why and what I replaced it with. The reason why I switched from wearing an Apple Watch all the time to just wearing it as a fitness tool is because while I was moving, I had enough with all the notifications, even things that weren't specifically for text messages or emails. I was getting fitness notifications, I was getting battery status notifications, over and over and over again, all these different notifications. And with the fact that I was in the process of moving my life to another country, I had enough. I took it off and I was done. But because I've been wearing a watch for so long, I've got a pretty brutal tan line where I have always worn a watch. So I decided maybe I should just wear a regular watch again. And as I was packing, I just kept finding watch after watch after watch. I've collected watches before, but when I switched over to wearing an Apple Watch, I pretty much stopped collecting or wearing regular watches. But it was almost like the universe was telling me to go back and start collecting and wearing regular watches again. And so I want to talk to you about what I've found, the watches that I've found, what each of them are, and just kind of give you some useful information if you're like me and you're just done wearing a smartwatch as a regular watch and you want to maybe explore the possibility of wearing a regular watch. So buckle up, because we're going to be going through a couple different types of watch technology, and we're also going to be going through the watches that I have in my collection that pertain to each of those technologies. And hopefully we're going to teach you a few things and maybe give you an idea of where you should start when it comes to watch collecting. And if you're into that kind of stuff or technology in general, definitely make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss other content like this, and maybe like it if you're enjoying this video so far. So starting out with the most common kind of watch technology that you're going to find, we are going to look at digital quartz watches. And these are extremely reliable. These things are very accurate. Depending on the model you get, they can be very durable, and they are extremely affordable. For example, this little guy right here, which is the Casio F91W. These things can be picked up at Walmart for about 22 bucks, and if you're not in a country that has a Walmart, well, they can still be picked up for about 22 bucks, just converted to whatever currency your country uses. I would usually consider this thing to be kind of the Toyota Corolla of Apple Watches. It's cheap, it's efficient, it just works. It will get you from point A to point B, or in this case, it'll do what it's intended to do no matter what. And it's got a 7-year battery. People have said that these things last longer. It's generally water resistant. You're not really gonna go diving or swimming with it, but there are instances where these things have survived quite a lot, some with some modifications, but either way, this is a very useful utility watch, and it's not huge on the wrist. It's very comfortable. It does feel cheap, and there are other elements of it that do also feel cheap. For example, the backlight. This thing has a single green LED in the corner, and it does shine enough that you can see the time, but it's really nothing special, kind of like a Toyota Corolla. Like, if this thing were a car, the oil change intervals on this thing would give you the time and then say optional.
In the owner's manual, oil is listed as optional.
It is just a basic watch. They don't expect it to really be doing anything fancy or flashy or special. It's just gonna be what it is. But let's say you do want something that has that reliability, that affordability, the general 80s vibe, but you want it to be a little flashier. Well, you could also go with something like this, which is basically the F91W. It's the A168WA, but instead of using the single little LED backlight, it uses electroluminance. Now, that electroluminance does have a lifespan, so don't use it all the time, and if you do keep this watch for a long time, it will eventually stop working. But you've got a nice metal bracelet, you have a chromed out plastic body, but everything else is exactly the same, and you still have that really cool sort of 80s vibe. Now, those are just two watches in the digital quartz category, and I'm sure looking at them, you're probably thinking, well, how could you say, if these are so cheap, that they are also reliable and accurate? Well, that comes down to the quartz technology itself. The technology behind a Quartz watch is pretty simple, but also really brilliant. The simplicity is why these watches can be so reliable because, like most things, if there are fewer things to fail, well, generally that thing is going to be more reliable. However, if something does fail, they do become generally cheaper to replace than to repair. That is a downside, but one of the upsides, the biggest upside, is the accuracy compared to other types of movements. That accuracy comes from the fact that a quartz crystal vibrates 32,768 times per second when voltage is run through it. You can read that frequency with an integrated circuit and get an extremely accurate timepiece, literally only gaining or losing a couple seconds every month, and in some instances, a year. That is insanely accurate, again, compared to other movements. And with that simplicity, this allows for watchmakers to also add other things to the watch on top of the standard timekeeping. For example, a calculator. So if you're a fan of Back to the Future, you can get something like this. These are, I believe, like $40 at Walmart. And yeah, this is really awesome. I don't use the calculator function too often, but it's just a cool piece of little nostalgic tech. You can also add things like world timers. For example, the Casio Royale here has multiple world time zones, and this thing was extremely useful when I was traveling over here to Taiwan because when I fly, I go from East Coast to West Coast, so I could just switch from East Coast to West Coast time zone without having to change the time manually. And then when I got all the way out here, I just switch it to the Taiwan time zone, and yeah, never had to hit the adjust button once, just search, 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 and I found it. And this thing also has 100 meters of water resistance, which is pretty impressive. It's got a little digital analog timepiece in the corner as well, which is cool. But my favorite part of this one is it has just the tiniest little map in the corner that shows you what time zone you are pulling the time from. That is super freaking cool. And this also has a backlight. It's not as bad as the Casio F91W, but it's still not great. You just have two little orange LEDs in the corner. It's good enough to get the job done. But now, if you've looked at all these watches that I've shown you so far and you're thinking, yeah, that's cool and all, and I like the idea of a Quartz digital watch, but I would break those immediately. Let me introduce you to G-Shock. G-Shock is another watch type from Casio, and yes, I have a lot of Casios because Casio is Nico.
Go up here! That was loud, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of hard to argue with how good Casio is in all these different categories, but not only is G-Shock Casio, but it is also an extremely durable version of everything we just talked about. So this one, for example, is actually one that you can buy in, I believe, stores on military bases, but yeah, this thing is ridiculously durable. This thing is also ridiculously durable. G-Shock, basically the goal with these watches is just to make as durable of a digital watch as possible, and they have other G-Shock versions of the next type of watch technology we'll talk about, but we're not there yet. But yeah, these things are legendary for their durability. There's a video of somebody throwing one of these out of a helicopter, which is pretty cool, and they survived a pretty high height. And then the, I believe, hydraulic press channel actually took one of these below its dive depth of 200 meters and basically just ran it until it imploded, which was really cool as well. So if you're the kind of person who likes the idea of the technology that we were just talking about, the digital quartz technology, but you want something that you can wear on the job site, you want something you can wear as a mechanic in a garage, and then at the end of the day you can take it off and throw it in your toolbox and it can just live with your tools and take it out, put it on, and it's still good to go. Yeah, well, you also have options in this category as well. But what if you're somebody who didn't use a digital watch face on your Apple Watch, or you just don't want a digital watch in general, but you don't want to spend a ton of money on an analog watch? Well, the next technology is Quartz Analog. So Quartz Analog uses the same quartz technology with the per second frequency readout and the extreme accuracy, but instead of using a digital watch face, it uses the traditional hour, minute, and second hands. And this one, for example, is a pretty classy one. This is a Citizen Bryson chronograph, and there's all kinds of stuff that you can get in this category, but let's focus on this one for a minute. So a chronograph in general is a watch that allows you to start and stop the big second hand to keep time. You can do either a couple minutes, you can do hours on some watches, and in the case of the Bryson watch, it has a 60-minute timer or 60-minute chronograph. It has a standard second hand below, not the big second hand, but the small second hand. It's got a date window, and it has a 24-hour clock in the small hand alongside your standard 12-hour clock. For me personally though, what I find really cool about these Citizen watches is the Echo Drive technology. Like, yeah, the chronograph is cool, but Echo Drive is very cool. Every Quartz watch, analog or digital, is going to require a battery, and generally they have a pretty good battery life. The F91W has a 7-year battery life. Some people have said it runs for longer. You also have things with 10-year battery life, like the Casio Royale. I don't know how long this thing's going to last. This is just some cheap Casio analog watch I bought. But the Echo Drive watch, the goal with this was to make a watch that never really had to have the battery changed. The way they did that was by having the watch face work as a solar pickup, or just a light pickup in general. I'm sitting here in front of studio lights and it's getting charged. I go outside, it is definitely getting charged. So you really never have to change the battery in these things. In fact, this thing sat in a box in my closet with the lid shut, so no light whatsoever. And when I took it out of the box and it got light, it immediately started ticking. That was super cool. And that's one of the really neat innovations that's really only available in a Quartz setup, because it's gonna have to have a battery. How do you power the battery if you're not gonna replace it? You can run solar, and even other watches have solar. Like, for example, you have a G-Shock with solar. It's just super cool tech. Speaking of chronograph watches, another watch that I have, and I'll explain why I have it in a little bit, is this. Yes, I bought a Moonswatch. This is the Moonswatch 1965. I love the history of Omega's Speedmaster and how it's a space watch. It was certified in 1965 for all-man spaceflight, and this is the watch to commemorate it from the Moonswatch collaboration. I love it. It's a chronograph as well, but instead of a 60-minute timer, this thing has a 65-minute hand and a 19-hour hand, 1965, and it's 60 years since the watch was certified for all-man spaceflight, so the 60 on the second hand also glows. It also has a tachymeter, which is a really cool piece of technology from back in the day as well. Basically, when you start the timer with the top hand here, it will tick, or on the real one, it will sweep down along these numbers around the bezel, and you run the timer until what you are timing goes past a known distance, for example, a kilometer. So if it goes past 1 kilometer and you stop it and it's sitting at the 125 mark, it is going 125 kilometers an hour. Like I said, I'll explain why I have this in a little bit. I like it. I think it's a really fun watch. It's not my everyday wear watch, but if I wanted an everyday wear watch that is a Quartz analog watch, kind of rugged, something I'm not afraid to beat up, what would I wear? Well, for me personally, I would wear, and in this case have worn for almost 20 years, this Timex Expedition. This watch also has quite a story in my life, and as you can tell by the leather strap, it's lived one hell of a life with me, but this is a field watch. It's pretty basic. There's no chronograph function. It tells the time. It does have an inner ring, so you can read the 24-hour time instead of just AM and PM. It has a date function, and it does have glowing hands in the nighttime, but my favorite part of this is actually the Indiglow, so you can just press the crown in and the entire back of the watch face lights up. It's pretty cool. By the way, if you're hearing a bunch of background noise and an echo, I'm not fully set up in the space yet, and my wife keeps dogs for customers, and there's dogs outside who are barking right now, so just bear with me. Either way, this is a great watch, and for just a rugged, simple watch, a field watch in general is a great option. They make other types in the next technology we're going to talk about, but for me personally, especially considering the price, I would stick with a Quartz analog version of this. Now, since we've been looking at a lot of analog watches, if you're coming from an Apple Watch and you used analog watch hands, you might have noticed that on the Apple Watch, the second hand smoothly sweeps across the watch face, but on analog Quartz watches, they go tick, tick, tick. This again comes down to the technology, Quartz being read once per second through an integrated circuit. When that circuit picks up that 1 second has passed, it sends a pulse to a motor that spins the gears to go tick, tick, tick. But why then does the Apple Watch, and hell, even the little clock, the widget on your phone, why does that move smoothly? They're emulating the next type of technology, which is a mechanical watch. Mechanical watches have been around way longer than quartz watches. These things have no batteries, there's no electricity, they are literally gears and springs. That is it. And so, because they are gears and springs, they don't tick 1 time per second, they tick multiple times per second and smoothly sweep the second hand around the watch face. For example, this is a Seiko watch. This is a Seiko 5. This is my 3rd automatic watch. This is sort of a dive style watch, but I also tend to wear it more often, so I went with a rubber strap instead of a metal bracelet. But this thing is a mechanical automatic watch. This means that as you move, there's actually a wheel or a weight inside that spins that will wind the mechanism that lets the watch run. This does come with some drawbacks, however, because with this being 100% mechanical, something you have to keep in mind is where maintenance on a quartz watch for most of the quartz watch's life is just going to be battery replacements. These, at some point in their life, may have to be rebuilt or may just have to be replaced depending on how expensive or how cheap the watch is. For this watch specifically, it is using what is called the NH35 movement. It does have a day-date function. This means that not only do you see the date number, which we've seen on other watches, but it also shows the day. So in this case, I know that it is Saturday the 29th, because I know multiple times I have forgotten what day it is, so being able to look down and see, oh, not only do I know the number day, but I also know the day. That's pretty nice. And in a dive watch like this, unlike a chronograph where you actually start and stop a second hand, which runs multiple faces with multiple hands, this has a timer on the bezel. Essentially, you spin the bezel until the arrow on the bezel is where the minute hand is. Once it's sitting where the minute hand is, you just let it sit there, and as the minute hand moves, it will naturally show you along the bezel how many minutes have passed. It's a pretty simple style of timing, but it's good for divers because you can look down and see how long you've been underwater. Though most people who go diving nowadays aren't using mechanical watches, they're going to be using something digital. It's just normally how it goes. Either way though, this watch is a very cool watch, and I think this is one that for a lot of people is a good starter. Unless you happen to run across this brand. I can already hear the hate because you're probably thinking of a different type of watch from this brand, but this is an Invicta. This is an Invicta Pro Diver. And yes, I said Invicta. I know tons of people hate it because they make watches that look like this, but here's the thing. This watch, or this series of watches, has a very special place in my heart, and so I'm always going to have one, at least one, in my collection from the Pro Diver lineup. And I'll explain why in a little bit, but yeah, this is always going to be in my collection. And the funny thing is, this thing actually uses the same NH35 movement as a lot of Seiko watches. So in reality, if you find one of these at a really good price, they are probably one of the cheapest ways to get into a decent Seiko movement. And if you go with something like the Grand Diver, the next level up from this guy, you can go 300 meters underwater, and assuming the quality control is good with these guys still, it'll actually be water resistant to that depth. This guy is rated for 200 meters. In general, I would still trust it at 200 meters. I had a titanium version of this that lasted so long that I skipped a service and the little weight at the back fell off, but that's a different story for a different day. Point is, yes, Invicta gets a lot of hate, rightfully so with the designs that look like these. But when it comes to the Pro Diver, as an homage to the Rolex Submariner, or as a ripoff, depending on how you want to use the words, I've never had a bad experience with a Pro Diver, and my dad has a Grand Diver. These things were my entry point into mechanical watches, and like I said, for a reason I'll mention later, these will always, at least one of them will always be in my collection. But I do like the build of the Seiko a little more, so let me go ahead and put that one back on. So those are the 3 types of technologies in watches. We have quartz digital, quartz analog, and we have mechanical. But you might have noticed that I was calling these automatic watches. Why is that? Well, like I said, these have weights inside that actually wind the watch as you move around. So as your arm moves, this watch will wind itself. Unfortunately, the watch I wanted to use didn't show up in time for this video, but I recently purchased a Seagull 1963, which is also a mechanical watch, and it's a mechanical chronograph. But here's the thing, that one is not automatic. That is a hand-wound watch, which means that every 24 or 48 hours, you are actually going to have to spin the crown and wind the watch. You can do that on watches like these, where you can manually wind them if they've been sitting for a while and they're not running anymore, which is also a thing. If you don't wear a watch for quite a while and it's a mechanical one, well, the spring will eventually unwind entirely, and you're gonna have to wind it up, set the time, and then put it on. A mechanical watch that isn't automatic is actually going to need to be hand wound regardless of whether you are wearing it or not. That is something that you are going to have to keep in mind if you decide to get into the mechanical side of things. Do you want an automatic that just winds as you wear, or do you want a mechanical that has to be hand wound because it looks cool or whatever the case may be? And in case you're wondering, no, a hand wound watch is not a cheap watch thing. That is actually something that is pretty common even on high-end watches. Something like the Dark Side of the Moon Omega Speedmaster is a hand wound mechanical watch, and those things are still in the thousands of dollars. So yeah, it's just one of the two types of variants you'll get in the mechanical watch space. So with all those technologies now, I hope you've kind of got an idea of what you would be getting into if you're interested in putting away your Apple Watch as a watch, maybe just using it for fitness, and getting into the watch space, the actual timepiece space, digital, analog, mechanical, all these different variants. But why would you have more than one? I mean, I have an Apple Watch. I only need to wear an Apple Watch, just one. I can change all these watch faces. Why would I need multiple watches? Well, it's not just because the watch tells time. The watch can also carry a story. For example, this Moonswatch here. Are there better watches for the price? Absolutely. Is this a quality watch? Not really, it's okay. But number one, I love the fact that it commemorates space, it commemorates history. I love history, I love science, I love space, but this watch is always going to carry one particular memory for me, which is the fact that this is the first watch that I bought when I moved to Taiwan. This thing is always going to have that memory, and that is why when I wear it, I will not only know the time, but I will think of that. But I mean, that's pretty recent history. Like, I'm still setting things up, so obviously I've only been in Taiwan for a short time. Let me show you one with a little bit more history. This watch is always going to have the memory of me traveling to Taiwan. This thing was used when I flew here, and it let me just switch between the time zones as I flew along. But again, that's still not very long history. What about an even longer bit of history? Brace yourselves, because, well, it's the Invicta watch. The Invicta Pro Diver lineup was my first foray into mechanical watches, but not just that, the titanium one that I have that I skipped maintenance on and it eventually broke was the watch that my parents bought me when I graduated high school, and I wore that thing constantly. I wore that thing so much. And this one I got because, well, it was sort of to celebrate that I got my teaching job. So these watches have those memories tied to them. My first mechanical watch, the first lineup that I bought that was a mechanical watch, my graduation from high school, my job as a teacher, these things hold memories. My personal favorite is this one because, like I said, this thing has lived a life with me of almost 20 years. I was in Boy Scouts for so long, made it all the way to Eagle Scout, went to Camp Senequippy, which if you don't know what that is, you can look it up. But this was the watch that I bought from the trading post, the original trading post at Camp Senequippy. It was the most expensive thing that I ever bought from that trading post, but I wanted it because I wanted a watch that I could wear when I was going rope climbing or wall climbing. I wanted this to be able to survive when I would swim in the lake. I wanted this thing to be able to be worn this way or this way when I was shooting at the shooting range, and I just wanted something that I could actually see the time at night, even if the loom was not bright enough. And this thing did all of that. And this strap survived all of it. This watch survived all of that. And I'm gonna wear this strap until it falls apart. This thing hopefully is gonna be a watch that I give to one of my kids when they go into either scouting or some sort of outdoors activities, so that they can also continue to wear this thing and rely on it as they go through their adventures. Why can't I talk? That they can rely on when they go on their adventures. This G-Shock was one that I bought when I had a photography job because my boss said, hey, if you're gonna wear a watch, that's fine, but get one that's gonna be able to survive hell. And he recommended this, and this is what I bought. And even though it doesn't look like it's been through hell, this thing has survived a lot, which in my opinion is a testament to how reliable these things are, but also every little scratch this has, and every time I wear it, it reminds me of when I used to do photography and some of the crazy stuff I got to shoot. Hopefully you're kind of getting the idea now of why somebody like me would buy multiple watches instead of, like with an Apple Watch, just buying one. These things aren't just tools for telling the time, they're things you wear when you do things. Astronauts wore the Speedmaster when they went to space. Divers wore Rolex Submariners when they went and dove. Hell, James Cameron had a Rolex on the arm of his submersible when he went down to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. Almost every time something significant in history has happened, there has been a watch involved on the wrist of the person who did it. And I'm not saying that you or I are going to be doing anything historically significant. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But that can be scaled down to any time you do something significant to your history, to your life, you can have a watch involved, and that memory is going to be imbued in that watch. And I just think that is so cool. Because like I said at the beginning, I have worn an Apple Watch since the very beginning, but you'll notice I don't have my first gen Apple Watch. I don't have my Series 1, my Sport, my 2, my 3, my 4. I don't have any of those. The only one I have is the Ultra. And even if I had my Sport, which has all the memories that I wore the watch to, all these things that I did with the Sport, it wouldn't matter because A, the battery would be dead and those things are borderline unserviceable, and B, these have a shelf life. I mentioned they have a shelf life which is dictated by software. Yes, they do get a pretty significant software update life, but eventually these things aren't going to run the latest software, and at a certain point beyond that, they're probably not going to pair to your phone anymore, and once the batteries die, these things are borderline unserviceable. So while these are going to be used, abused, replaced, while these might get updated, replaced, whatever, you will still have, if you maintain them well, the watches that you wore at a wedding, at a funeral, at the birth of your child, when you had a job interview that you nailed, any of these things, when you spent, God, so many years camping at a camp. I keep coming back to this watch. It is my personal favorite, but you have all these memories in these watches, just imbued in these. And you're not going to have that on an Apple Watch. And then of course, reeling it all back, it's also nice to just not get constant pings on your wrist. That's what sparked it for me. And once I started wearing watches again, I realized how much more significant these are compared to an Apple Watch. If you want to wear an Apple Watch, that's totally fine. I think that it is a good way to get into having something on your wrist, getting used to having a watch. But if you're like me, and you still want to track your fitness, but you're just done, absolutely done with all the notifications and even sometimes just not caring about the fitness. You know that if you're working out, your body is counting it, your watch doesn't have to. Hopefully this video helped you look at the different technologies in watches and maybe get you started on the path of watch collecting. Just be careful because it can be addicting. And also maybe hold off on buying your first Casio until you have a couple other watches, otherwise you're going to have a lot of Casios. Either way though, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I know it's been a longer one, but I could go on for a long time about these watches and how much they mean to me and the technology. It's all so cool, but hopefully this gives you a start. And if you like this video, definitely make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, but obviously other tech, not just watches. I've got other things planned as well. And also, these names back here, huge shout out to these names. These are all the channel members. These guys keep the lights on. These folks are great. $3 a month if you're interested. You get things like store discounts. You also get, this is kind of a cool thing, you get wallpapers. I'm working on adding more wallpapers now. I'm editing a few photos, so keep an eye out if you are a member. But yeah, $3 a month, wallpapers, store discounts, all kinds of stuff. Check that out down below as well. Huge shout out again to these names for keeping the lights on, keeping things moving, even when things get a little slow around here. But aside from that, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.